Dwelling approvals are down 21%. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my afternoon stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at some of the latest dwelling approval figures from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, because from this time last year, they're down 21%. Now, this is a chart that I show almost every other video. This is from the Foreign Investment Review Board, and this is to do with the number, Foreign Investment Review Board approved investments in established housing, LHS, approved investment in new housing, and then the approved investment in new housing as a share of Australian Bureau of Statistics residential building approvals. And, between 14, 15, 16, 17, it hit over 90%. 90%. So, if we're looking at this data, this was just released today, and this is the building approvals and, dwelling approvals here in Australia. And we'll read through this and, give us a bit of perspective over what's going on. So the number of dwellings approved fell 0.8% in September 2019 in trend terms and has fallen for 22 months, according to the data released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics today. The fall in trend dwelling approvals for September was the smallest monthly decline in 6 months, said Daniel Rossi, Director of Construction Statistics at the ABS. However, the number of dwellings approved remains 21.1% lower than the same time last year. So I think this is an important statistic just to keep in mind for everyone who's involved in the construction industry and has noticed a slowdown over the last year, because this is over a fifth reduction in dwelling approvals, and that's going to be an indicator as to why it's slowed down a bit, guys. Across the states and territories, dwelling approvals fell in the Northern Territory, 9.3%, Western Australia, 2.4%, the Australian Capital Territory, 1.8%, New South Wales, 1.2%, Queensland, 0.5%, Victoria, 0.4%, Tasmania, 1.6%, and South Australia, 0.4%, recorded increases in trend terms. So it fell in NT, Western Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, and South Australia, they increased. In trend terms, approvals for private sector housing fell in WA and South Australia, 2.7%, 1.3%. Victoria rose at 0.1%, while private house approvals in New South Wales and Queensland were flat. The seasonally adjusted estimate for total dwellings approved rose 7.6% in September, driven by a 16.6% increase in private dwellings excluding houses. Private sector houses rose 2.8%. The value of buildings approved rose 1.4% in September in trend terms and has risen for 9 months. The value of residential buildings rose 0.5%, while non-residential building rose 2.5%. So we're seeing an increase in this month, a slight uptick, and that would align with some of the anecdotal evidence and verbals I'm getting with friends and people in the industry. But overall, that just dive year on year is huge. So here let's have a look at number of total dwelling approves. The trend estimate for Australia fell 0.8% in September. Private dwellings, we can see that's trending down. That's remaining flat. The trend estimate for private sector houses approved fell 0.3%. The number of private sector dwellings excluding houses, and it fell again, 1.3%. Value of new residential buildings. So the value rose in September after falling for 6 months. So that aligns with, the data that is coming out. The value of alterations and additions to residential buildings The trend estimate for the value to alterations and additions to residential buildings fell 0.4% in September and has fallen for 6 months. So that's the smaller side of the construction sector that's heading down. The value of non-residential building. The trend estimate for the value of non-residential buildings, building approvals rose 2.5% in September and has risen for 14 months. So that's an encouraging sign. And we'll jump here. And this is dwelling units approved and the state trends. So I'll need a swig of my coffee here. New South Wales. And the total dwelling units, there we go. The trend estimate for total number of dwelling units approved in New South Wales fell 1.2% in September. The trend estimates for the number of private sector houses was flat. So I'm not surprised that, given the confidence in the market, particularly for apartments in New South Wales, I'm not surprised that they're trending down. Victoria, the trend estimate for total number of dwelling units approved in Victoria fell 0.4% in September. The trend estimate for the number of private sector houses rose 0.1% in September. So do you think, if you're going to invest or buy, I think more people will look for a house now than an apartment, just because of the way the media is going. Queensland, the trend estimate for total number of dwelling units approved in Queensland fell 0.5% in September. Trend estimate for the number of private sector houses was flat. South Australia, the total number of dwelling units approved rose 0.4 in September. Trend estimate for the number of private sector houses fell 1.3. Western Australia fell 2.4. Private sector houses fell 2.7 in September. So there we are. Now let's have a look at one more bit of data coming out of this, and this is the characteristics of apartment approvals, and I think that's quite interesting to go through, just given the state of things. The number of new apartments approved surged between 2012 and 2018, driven by a large rise in 4 or more story developments in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. However, in the 2018-2019 financial year, apartment approvals fell to a 6-year low. This article examines characteristics of the number of new apartments approved in the 15-year period from 2014-15 financial year to the 2018-19 financial year. Apartments have been split into 4 categories: low rise 1 to 3, medium rise 4 to 8, high rise 9 to 19, and super high rise 20 stories or more. Data includes both private and public developments. Data are presented for flats, units and apartments, collectively referred to as apartments in this article, defined as blocks of dwellings that don't have their own private grounds and usually share a common entrance, foyer or stairwell. For further information, refer to this. Data presented in this article are available in the Building Approvals by Number of Stories data cube on the Download tab. And I will link to this because I'm sure everyone wants to get that data cube. So, the national summary. In the 15-year period from 2004-05 to 2018-19, 696,295 apartments were approved in Australia. There was volatility in the number and type of apartments that were approved during this time. The number of apartments approved fell during the GFC in 2008-19 to a low of 21,232 dwellings. However, by 2015-16, apartment approvals peaked at 82,371 dwellings. Apartment approvals have since fallen by 44% to 110,000 in 2018-19, the lowest since 12-13. Well, that's interesting. A 44% decline since the peak in 2015-16. And let's just bring back this chart, 2015-16. What can we see correlating with that? Foreign investment. So, since 04-05, mid-rise developments have comprised the largest share of apartments approved, contributing 282,549 dwellings, 40%. High-rise approvals contributed 157, 22%. Low-rise, 131, 18%. Super high-rise, 125, which was at 18%. Oh, that's interesting. So, approved by story numbers. So you can see there, 4 or 8 stories more is the biggest number. In 2015-16, mid-rise apartments comprised 39.8% of all apartment approvals. By 2018-19, this proportion had increased to 44.7%. This appears to have come at the expense of low-rise apartments, which contributed 12.3% of apartment approvals in 2015-16, down to 8.6% in 18-19. Since the peak of the apartment approval boom in 2015-16, there have been large falls in approvals for all apartment heights. 60% down in 1 to 3, 37 4 to 8, 43 down for 9 to 19, and 47.6 down for 20 plus. Despite the falls from the peak of the apartment boom in 18-19, there were 46,000 dwellings approved in apartment developments, consistent with the 15-year average of 46,000. So there you go, it's come back to average. And here you're seeing, I mean, we can see here, guys, look at that boom there. Look how that's driven up. And who would not, I mean, it just makes sense. If you overheat a sector, it's going to cause issues. This is why we're having all these construction issues come out now. So what I would do is I would look at the build times. Okay, and we'll say maybe from 2010 it looks like it's overheated. Maybe even go back to 2008 and only shop around for stuff from this period. Right here. Right here. All of this stuff. Go, nah, I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to purchase or buy. I mean, that's one way of measuring it. You know, what do you think about that, guys? On average, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland make up 80% of the total dwelling approvals across Australia. Well, there you go. There you go. And 86.3% of all apartment approvals. However, the composition of apartment types was not similar across the states. New South Wales was the nation's leader in mid-rise approvals, while Victoria had the most high-rise construction. Oh, that's interesting. So, graph 4, apartments approved by number of stories, New South Wales. Oh, there you go. New South Wales recorded 275,048 apartments approved between 0405 and 1819, the highest of any states. Of these, 47.8% were between 4 to 8 stories. Approvals in 4 to 8 story apartment buildings peaked in 2015-16, with 17,420 dwellings were approved. This represents over half of all apartment developments. Wow. While still the most common apartment building type in New South Wales, the slowdown in apartment demands has led to a fall in mid-rise developments, with only 9,061 approved in 2018-19, representing a total fall of 44.9%. I mean, guys, think about this. If you're investing in one of these things, you know, what unique difference do you have? Maybe of you, and then, you know, debt for repairs forever? Just think about that. All these people that are spruiking you. So, of the 3 major states, New South Wales had the second highest amount of super high residential apartment approvals, 34,955, but the lowest proportion, just comprising 12.2. I need a shot of coffee. Comprising 12.7% of all apartment approvals. Apartment approvals by number of story in Victoria. So here we have Victoria. Victoria recorded 192,737 apartment approvals between 0405 and 1819. Of these, the largest proportion was 4 to 8 stories, comprising 36.5% of all apartments approved. Victoria had the nation's greatest proportion of super high-rise, 20-story plus apartment approvals, with 55,418 approved, 28.8% of the state's total apartment approvals. Apartment approvals in super high-rise peaked in 17-18 at 8,836. In 2017-18, 39.8% of apartment approvals were for super high-rise apartments. These figures fell back close to the average in 18-19 to 29.5. With 3,664 apartments were approved. This represents a year-on-year fall of 58.5% for super high-rise apartment approvals in Victoria. Just think about that, guys. It's the delta change. It's the delta change. That's almost like a daily Bitcoin move, isn't it? So let's look at good old Queensland. What did we get? We had 132 apartments approved from 0405 to 1819. Approvals were more balanced across the 4 categories when compared to New South Wales and Victoria. Well, Queenslanders, we're just more balanced people, aren't we? Aren't we? Yep, definitely. as I drink half a litre of coffee. Apartments in 4 to 8 story developments were the most common, comprising 31.7% of all apartments approved. This is followed by 1 to 3 stories at 34,000, 9 to 19 at 31, and 20 plus at 24,000. Queensland experienced an unprecedented apartment boom between 2014-15 and 2015-16, when 34,134 apartments were approved in 2 years. Now, I will link to my video I did, where I'll just show the South Brisbane West End area, where I have a walk around and just show the number of apartments that have gone up there. And here we go. There we go. 70% decrease in high-rise and super high-rise developments in 3 years. 76.0% decrease here. The largest proportional fall amongst all 3 major states. So those of you in Queensland that were involved in the high-rise apartment sector here and have noticed a bit of a slowdown in your work, this could be why. This is why. This is why. I mean, here we go. Here we see all that foreign investment. A big chunk of it was derived into high rises here in Queensland as well. I'd put money on it. Anyway, guys, that gives us all a bit of an overview to see where it's headed. You know, I think this is probably not a bad idea. Shop before the boom. Before the boom. If you have to look. If you have to look. You know, but everyone do their own research. That's just, you know, seems to make a bit of sense. Before it got hot. Anyway, let me know what you think. Are you noticing the slowdown in the construction sector? Has it picked up for you before Christmas? How are you planning to deal with it? Like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy my content and want to help me produce more, please have a look at my links for my Patreon and my Subscribe Star. Every little bit helps. And welcome to my newest subscriber that joined today. Take care, everyone, and I will see you all probably later. I think I'll do one more video today. See ya.